we're excited to have Ralph Crowder III, who I just want to say a few words about him and sort of my relationship to him, how I've come to know him and appreciate his art, his creativity, which in so many ways reflects civic engagement and social justice. So Ralph Crowder III graduated from Virginia Union University with a degree in education, double major education and African American studies. And since then, he's been involved in a number of artistic endeavors, including community-based radio programming in Minneapolis, where he's from, New York, and Los Angeles. He's also directed TV commercials, and he served as a consultant for a number of community news outlets. Currently, Ralph Crowder is the producer and director of programming for Freedom Radio News and Culture Television. Some noted documentaries are Runaway Dreams and Cardboard Condos, Black Men and Issues of Homelessness in Downtown Los Angeles, An Evening with the Jazz Legend Roy Ayers, No Child Left Behind, Black Children in the State of Emergency, DJ Jazzy Jeff, The South Bronx, and the History of the Birth of Hip Hop, and Memphis, A City Rich in Song Experience. One of the things that the American Studies Department in Media and Communications, one of the things that we often talk about are alternative sources of media. We know that we often call the media the fourth branch of government. And just yesterday in my African American history course, one of the students said, well, you know, how do we siphon through all of the typical rhetoric that's out there? You know, why is there so much information that I've never heard before? Which was such an interesting question. And I attempted to answer it, and I don't know that I have the best answer, but I think when we have opportunities to lend attention to creative artists such as Ralph Crowder, that might be a good place to start. So this film, The Black Liberation Movement, Reflection in Time, History and Purpose, 1968 to 1975, is the first part of Ralph's trilogy. So he's doing 3 documentaries, and he really will see a different perspective, sort of in the same vein of what Dr. Fernandez was talking about. When we think about the Civil Rights Movement, particularly Black History Month, we often get recurring names and recurring leaders and recurring figures. And one of the things that I think is in sync with much of the scholarship, at least recent scholarship pertaining to the Civil Rights Movement, is that it was really a grassroots movement, right? It was a movement by the masses. And what we'll see here, Ralph Crowder, his father was very much part of the extended civil rights movement in Minneapolis, right? So it sort of, in many ways, reflects local narratives that were part of a national movement. So we'll see his personal story, we'll see it's sort of spanning from New York to Minneapolis, and we'll see the continuation of self-help initiatives, the notion of self-determination, and the idea of what it meant to invoke Africa during a time when it was not popular to do so. You know, that various communities, you know, had a sort of sense of nationalism during this era is a response to power relationships and constructions of race that I think he explores in interesting ways. So at the heart of the film are local stories that were part of a nationalist movement And I think, and we'll get a chance to talk with Ralph during the Q&A, I think it's not a national pride, at least this is my read, and you'll have your read. It's not a nationalist pride that is anything new, but what happens during that moment, during the time period from 68 to 75, I think what's happening is something that he'll at least discuss, and I think it's important. It sort of reminds me, those of us that are familiar with the Harlem Renaissance, you might remember Alan Locke sort of talking about the notion of the new Negro, right, and what that meant in terms of identity, you know, wanting to sort of move away from these old negative stereotypes, these old, you know, the old ways in which African Americans were caricatured in the mainstream press. And what happens in the 70s is, I think, an extension, or at least it mirrors that in many ways. So we'll see African naming ceremonies in the film, wedding rituals. We'll see sort of a nice portrait of college students in Minnesota who were very much part of the push to get Black Studies programs to be part of, you know, institutions of higher learning. So please welcome me and welcoming Ralph Crowder, and thank you for your attendance.
What's happening, everybody? Yeah, I knew Jermaine when he had dreadlocks. We talked about that a little earlier. Yeah, I know. He gave a nice introduction. It sounded real professional and everything. I'm just going to loosen it up just a little bit. So before we start the actual introduction piece with the narration over it, I just want to say that if I would have known that the auditorium was right here, I thought that we was walking, when we walked to the auditorium, it was in the other building where the cafeteria spot was, and there was a gang of students around there, and I would have definitely hollered at the students to, you know, encourage them to come and look at the film, because I think it's important that, you know, history is very important. And sometimes when we talk about history, you know, I think a lot of the youth think we're talking like 50, 60 years ago, you know, slavery, that kind of thing, and then it's a constant theme of that. But history is your personal history, your father, your mother, your grandmother. I mean, it's very close to you, and it's very important that we document our history. And so we can kind of start the narration piece, I guess, right now. So basically, in keeping in tune with that, being a part of media, I thought it was very important that that documentation be done in a media-driven platform. So I started a television network called Freedom Radio News and Culture Television Network. And some of the things that I was seeing was recent issues of the Occupy Wall Street movement. And you know, it was very interesting. The dynamics around that is very interesting, beginning here in New York City, and how it spilled out across the country. And one of the things that I noticed in this movement was a lack of Black representation. That was it was a missing element, because if you talk about the 99% and the people who are being exploited and the people at the bottom, I mean, you have to have a conversation with Black America about that.
When I think about Ralph's film, in so many ways, it's an extension of Eyes on the Prize, but perhaps even in more important ways, because again, it sort of highlights the local story, which is personal for him. The gentleman throughout the film who's holding the baby is Ralph. and his father was actually a professor of mine in graduate school, and that's how I've come to know him. So we'd like to open it up for Q&A and, you know, continue the dialogue about, I think, a piece that was well done and quite creative. So if there are any questions, thank you, Ralph. I think that was a good job. And the artist is always at work. But are there any questions?
Just to go back to the earlier question about the early days of Black Studies and what effort it took, including shotguns, to get an African American history department. And I guess I'd just like to know your thoughts in terms of today and the trajectory that African American Studies has taken at the university, where it has, on one level, become extremely legitimate, probably more at the graduate level, more at elite institutions, and that the dissemination of this cultural period and historical period for undergraduates, just everyday courses, seems to be receding and to some degree kind of getting eaten up by the jingoism of race, sex, and class that we put across the disciplines. And therefore, African American studies becomes fairly invisible. So I just wonder what you think about that in terms of today's education system.
Yeah, it's too bad that we had to cut the film off, because there was a section in the film that dealt with that specific time and place where the different college campuses were, protesting the need for Black Studies programs, and they were at the very beginning stages of actually being a part of the curriculum in various different university campuses. But keep in mind, without that particular generation, you know what I'm saying? Without that generation and their positions and their oftentimes resistance and things of that nature, I don't think we would be here watching that film in a Black Studies month. You know what I'm saying? That's how important that era was. Because I highly doubt that you would have college campuses that would invest money and invest staff time and student time or whatever to come out for a Black History Month celebration. Now, and remember, this is an ongoing kind of, it's a one of a trilogy kind of situation, but now you see like the Black Studies programs or African American Studies programs potentially becoming obsolete if there isn't that same kind of resistance. If there still isn't a demand from the students, from the community, that, my history is valuable. My contribution to America or my contribution to the world is valuable. And it's important that I be dignified and learn in an academic environment about myself, and my contribution to history. But I think now we're coming to a place where potentially, if that still isn't an issue, that who knows what can happen. It's pretty, there's a lot of watered down stuff going on right now. And I think it's really important for the students that are here to really realize that you guys really hold the power, all the power you want. Anything that you guys want to see, you guys have the power to make it happen. But it only happens when you guys are actually letting your voice be heard. So especially if this is a media college that has a strong media program, and definitely the youth right now are definitely a media-driven kind of, their interests are definitely media-driven. I highly recommend that you guys start creating platforms and different things for your voices to be heard, whether that be that you want to have reflected in your academic studies or even in some issues that you might be concerned about socially. It's important that your voice, you guys make sure your voice is heard.